I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
Welcome to the podcast. Coming up today, we've got a lot about Formula One, if you care about the racing as well as the event. Plus, we're going to talk about Ford. There's a really cool Bronco thing that Hannah heard about, and they're scaling back a little bit on their electric vehicle production. So maybe that's an issue that touches the strike and politics. Finally, Hannah actually drove the XM. She's written down her thoughts, and she'll tell them to me. I have a much cheaper, but I think better alternative in the Dodge Durango Hellcat this week. All right, so Hannah, let's start with Formula One. It's not just about the racing, it's about the circus, and now it's in like a circus town. So there could be some real... What do you call that when two things come together and they get multiplied?
Synchronicity? I don't know.
I'm fascinated to know what it's going to be like when it goes to Las Vegas, which is already off the hook.
You're right. It's kind of like it's going to be greater than the sum of its parts, like 2 + 2 = 5, possibly, because like you say, this is the circus capital of the country. It even has a hotel called Circus Circus. And I started getting pitches and notes about this Grand Prix race like in early summer, like May, June. So the hype for this has been unparalleled, even higher than that of Miami or Austin. It's a big deal. Let's just say up front that, Max Verstappen has already clinched the title. We already know Red Bull has won the Constructors' Championship. So the race, while it still will be exciting, is even sort of more beside the point than usual because we already know how the season ends. To that effect, everything else happening in Las Vegas is going to be wild. I'm looking forward to going, and I'm also slightly terrified.
So in terms of like exciting, is Formula One... Do you get like amazing outcomes you would never have expected? Is it possible for somebody in like a satellite team to all of a sudden start winning and take over? Like, is there a lot of passing? Because when I stopped watching it, it was because there was a lack of all of those things.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you on that. Unfortunately, Max Verstappen has won the last 16 races. He's pretty solid and predictable, and that's wonderful for him, but less exciting for racing fans. Sergio Perez, of course, has been doing pretty okay. He's, I think, number 2 in the standings right now, but he did actually crash out at the Mexican Grand Prix this past weekend. So I guess you could call that sort of exciting. Thank God he was unhurt. But to your point, the leaders are the leaders. Lewis Hamilton has actually been kind of putting on a surge. He's the biggest superstar in the world right now when it comes to Formula racing, and he has been for years, despite the fact that, this year he hasn't been racing as well as he has in past years. And I think that has a lot to do with the car that he's driving. So to answer your question, no, it's honestly pretty predictable. I think the races still are fun to watch, but American viewers, honestly, they do have a point when they say you know what you're going to get even at the start of the race.
Right. I mean, So I would recommend people watch MotoGP, which is, in my opinion, a lot more fun. There's a lot more passing. You have a lot more drama in the actual race rather than, drama off the circuit, which I guess is what Formula One is more about. But
oh, that's shady. That's very shady.
It's true, though, right? I mean, it's more about the soap opera and...
Oh, well... I think Toto Wolff would disagree with you, but...
He is like number 1 promoter of the soap opera, Toto and Christian Horner. What are we going to see around Formula One? Like, are there going to be people getting like $500,000 dinner reservations? That's usually the story.
There's so much happening. The number one thing I'm actually really excited to see is the Sphere. It's this giant orb that we've all been hearing about. That's a concert space that U2 has been performing at for the past few weeks. It's a $2.3 billion arena with almost 18,000 seats, owned by James Dolan, who, of course, New Yorkers will know owns Madison Square Garden and a few other sports sporting teams that I'm not going to mention. But he's a polarizing figure, and this has really been a huge project. So during Formula One, you don't actually have to watch U2 if you don't want to at the Spirit. There are other people performing there, like Kylie Minogue, Mark Ronson, Nile Rodgers, Jay Balvin. There's a host of people performing there. So that's kind of like, for me, I would love to see a concert there. I just think it's going to be so cool.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see the Sphere. I don't even care if there's a concert there. I just want to see what it looks like in real life. If I do see, I think it's interesting that Dolan said he wants to make this the future and he's building it for generations to come. And he puts the oldest people he can think of on the stage. Like, is there anyone older than you two? Like maybe Kylie Minogue. So
possible.
Interesting stuff. All right, let's get to Ford, because you have found out about a Bronco event that I think is pretty interesting. And also, they just finished the strike, so they're going to be building Broncos again. There's a lot going on surrounding the Big Blue Oval.
Yeah, so this experience that Bronco is opening up to everybody in early November is called the Bronco Off-Rodeo Experience, spelled R-O-A-D, like the road. And it's basically, it was a nice perk that Ford gave people who bought a new Bronco, which was a day of training, off-road training in one of 4 locations, from Moab to a place in Texas to outside Nevada, and there's one in New Hampshire as well. And it was this complimentary day of off-road training, learning how to use the technology, some safety courses, etc. So now Ford has, I think, wisely realized that other people might like to do this too. And they have, they're going to open up some reservations November 2nd. It's going to cost a little under $800 for a half day of the same type of instruction. It sounds a little expensive to me, but the good thing is you don't even have to bring your own car. They will provide the vehicle for you. And that does include space for 4 people in the vehicle. So when you break it out and you can switch drivers. So when you break it out like that, it's kind of cool. I think it sounds fun. It's a good idea for them.
It doesn't sound too expensive to me. I mean, I do a lot of track days, motorcycle track days, and they're very inexpensive if you bring your own bike. If you want to use, the manufacturer's bike or, the event organizer's bikes, then it's much more expensive because, you're highly likely to wreck it. And I guess the same thing would be true with off-roading. I love the Bronco, and I think we've talked about this before. To me, the design is just, they nailed it. Yeah. And I don't even hate the V6. Traditionally, I don't love the EcoBoost engines, but for some reason, I love the 2.7 liter in the Bronco. In terms of Ford, they have gone so whole hog, like against the V8 for the most part, right? They stopped making their big V8s and the Raptor, and they put an EcoBoost in it. And they were going so forward into EVs that it was costing them $3 billion this year. Then they updated those loss figures to say it was going to cost them $4.5 billion just this year. And now it seems like the demand for EVs isn't there, at least not at the level that everyone thought it was going to be. So they're shifting back towards more hybrid vehicles, which I think is the way forward anyway. But Bill Ford also pointed out EVs are getting truly politicized. It's almost like a vaccine.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was looking at some data from Bloomberg Hyperdrive, which really focuses on electric vehicles, and it made the point that this year EVs in the U.S. will comprise about 10% of new car sales. But 10 states have already surpassed that benchmark, and all of those 10 states are Democratic states. So I think that's really interesting.
Blue states buy EVs.
Exactly. I also, it is true that the Republican Party does tend to want to repeal EV incentives. Contrastingly, Biden has said that he'd like half of all new vehicle sales to be electric by the end of the decade, which I think seems a bit optimistic. So
and that's hard to square with wanting people to keep their jobs.
Well,
because
yes.
It takes far fewer people to build an electric drivetrain than it does to build an ICE motor.
Of course, and that was a real sticking point with some of the strikes that we've seen at Ford. And now that Ford has agreed to a 25% increase in wages, it's going to make it even more difficult for that company to eke out some profits. And I was going to say, the other thing I think about this, though, is yes, EVs are political, but also I don't think the automakers like Ford and General Motors can just rely on that as an excuse for not making EVs, because the truth is electrifying big pickup trucks is very difficult. They're very big. They weigh a ton. And to keep those prices competitive, honestly, I think they're finding it's very difficult. They're having supply chain issues as well.
Good point.
So yes, they are political. And yes, it's fair to say that some people may not want an electric vehicle, but I don't think that's the only reason that they're walking back their targets.
Right, they're using this as an excuse, like when a retailer says we didn't sell enough jackets because of the weather.
Yeah, a little bit.
It's a little bit tired. I think it's interesting. I spent a lot of time on forums, car forums like Beamer Post and Challenger Talk and Ducati.ms and stuff. All of the ICE old guys are so against EVs, it almost does feel like a vaccine thing. Like they're starting to accuse EVs of being planted by Bill Gates or listening to what you do after work. And I think that's a load of BS.
Well,
we have to all be able to agree that it's a great propulsion system. To get you from A to B, it works really well. And if you want to go fast, EVs really are an incredibly efficient way to do that. Now, on the other hand, I feel like the infrastructure is not there yet.
Yeah.
And we are going to have to pay a lot as a country if we want to get to a competitive position with other countries like China. So if that's important to us, maybe we take that on as a goal. If it's not, I think hybrids are a really good way forward.
I know you love your hybrids. I mean, I really was thinking about that last week, your love for hybrids, because I think just they're like a bit of a Band-Aid. But you did make a good point that if you really keep it charged, it could be worth it.
Yeah, because, you can just drive around town doing your little errands for which you use the car most often on EV power. And then when you're going on a long trip, you can stretch out your legs with the gas engine. I mean, obviously, there are going to be good hybrids and bad hybrids.
Sure.
I just think if you go full BEV, there just aren't a lot of people who want one.
Yeah.
And almost no one can afford one. So I know that we want to be competitive, and we need to keep our eye on that ball as well. But it's an interesting topic. It's an interesting debate. Let's get to, speaking of hybrids, number 3 on my list of things to talk about today. That's the BMW XM. We touched on it last time, but you hadn't really spent a lot of time with it. And I really want to know, beyond the ugly headliner, which I think we can all agree on, what the hell were they thinking? What do you think about the XM?
I think it is obviously it's very powerful. This is the most powerful SUV we've had from BMW. It does have a lot of space. It's longer than the G-Wagon. It's wider than an Audi Q8. It does offer a lot of space for those of us who are taller. I do love that curved screen on the dashboard that is basically two 12-inch screens under a single pane of glass. It's very beautiful. It does resist sticky fingers and glare, and I did eat some Cheetos and, do my best on those. So those are some nice points. I still think that it drives in an unsophisticated manner. It's incredibly jerky. I think if they had had perhaps an air suspension instead of a coil setup, that might have helped a little bit. I'm not an engineer, but I at least know that that might have helped. It just feels unsophisticated to drive. The steering is not elegant. I don't know, Matt. Am I hitting
I totally
any notes
agree
for you?
with everything you're saying. As soon as I drove it out of the garage in Chelsea, when I spent a week with it, I thought, I can't believe this feels like they haven't finished it. It feels like a pre-production vehicle.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought maybe they rushed to get it out, but why? Because I hadn't really heard much about it.
I know.
In sort of mainstream media. It is jerky. I think the transmission has all kinds of issues, which a lot of these hybrids. That's really a down. That's really a minus point for some of the hybrids, like the Jeep 4xe. It has the same problems.
And by the way, when people saw on social media that I was driving this, I got unsolicited multiple people already writing in saying they were having issues with it, which is not a good thing because it hasn't been out that long either.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think it's cool in terms of design, but a lot of people obviously hate it.
Yeah.
I like the throwback M's that they put on, or the BMW logos that they put on each corner of the windshield in the back. Mm-hmm. I like it so big because I'm so big,
I think you used the term brutalist last week, which I thought was very charitable of you. I really tried to keep that in mind when I looked at it. I think it might be a touch heavy-handed in general, but brutalist is a nice way to put it.
Yeah, it's aggressive.
I could see that. I will say also about the XM, and I really don't know why, but somehow it's designed where it's really difficult to sense where in space you are when you park it. I don't know if you experience that too. And I don't think it's just a function of the size or my inability to park because I park other big things. There's something about it that I would pull into the curb thinking I'm very close, and I've still got 12 or 16 inches. I got in and out of it.
I will admit that that's a problem I have in any car. Like I have that problem in a Mini Cooper. I'm horrible at parking, which is why I'm so happy to be back in America, in Westchester, where you can park a dump truck in the parking spaces that we have compared to what I lived with in Germany for years and years.
Parking is hard.
I'm not good at parking. Yeah. But I didn't really notice that because I'm bad at it with everything. I will say that this week I'm driving a truck that I think no one is cross-shopping with the BMW XM, but it's so much better and for so much less, even though it's expensive.
What do you like about it?
I'm driving the Dodge Durango Hellcat, right? So
okay.
It's a 3-row kind of grocery getter. It's a dad car, but it's got one of the greatest power plants ever invented in front of it. Like the supercharged 6.2-liter V8 from Dodge is just a slice of heaven. I mean, there's so many things I don't really like about the Durango. It's not terribly comfortable. The seats are much smaller than in like the Challenger or the Charger. I don't love the layout of the gauges, and even though the infotainment system's okay, it's not anything to write home about. But even if I disliked more things about the Challenger, the engine outweighs all of those concerns. Like, it's just so effortless when you touch the pedal, and it's addictive. I mean, the way the power comes on is just intoxicating, and it's, I think, so much better than the Challenger or the Charger Hellcat because it's got all-wheel drive, right? That motor with just rear-wheel drive, you're spinning your tires all day long. But when you put a four-wheel drive system on it, it's just unbelievably good. So it's expensive for a Durango, right? It costs like $90,000 out of the box, but and over $100, the one I'm driving. But it's nothing near the 156. I think the BMW XM starts for 156. Starts
there and goes up from there. And I'm curious now because I see that this is claiming 710 horsepower on this Dodge, which is more than the BMW.
Yes.
So I'd like to get behind the wheel.
It's just
sounds cool.
It's one more reason that BMW missed the mark.
Yeah.
Like, why say it's our most powerful car ever and talk about the power when you detuned the motor? Why not go over 700, which seems to be the level that, that's the Raptor TRX level. And I feel like they could have done that. Every time I see a super expensive foreign car now on the road and I'm driving this Durango, I'm like, yes, American superchargers.
Well, I should say in BMW's defense, they are coming out with a special XM label version that they say they'll be delivering in November, and will have over 700 horsepower. And of course, that starts at about 190,000.
Wow.
So maybe they sort of, they should have launched that sooner. So we'd be talking about that, because that seems quite a lot.
That's also the supercharger in the Durango makes me wonder about the turbos in BMW and pretty much every other car, especially European. Why do you think they all, European and Japanese, went turbos and Americans stuck to superchargers? Like, why would you not want the power low down from a supercharger? I feel like it's the best way to force induction.
I think that's a case of straight roads versus curvy roads. And when you're on, I know this, when you're on curves, you can really, really utilize the turbo boost. And it feels incredible. When you're driving like up in the hills, up Angeles Crest, if you really know how to use it well, and I've driven and been with drivers who use it incredibly to their advantage, and it's amazing. And I don't know if you would get the same feel from a supercharger. I tend to think American cars were based on straight open highways, and European and Asian cars were based on, tighter, smaller, curvier roads.
You're probably right.
That's my theory.
The turbochargers, maybe there's more sophistication there, and maybe there's a learning curve. Like, Americans just want to get into a supercharged truck and be able to stomp the pedal, and we care about the quarter mile. That's why the 930 was like the Widowmaker. When any American got behind the wheel, right, they wrecked it.
Which I think is a total misnomer. That, to me, was a case of wealthy men getting behind the wheel, not understanding how to drive that thing properly. Because when driven properly, it's a beautiful car. You just need to know what you're dealing with. That's my soapbox.
You're probably right. By the way, I don't know. This wasn't listed as a topic, but I saw my first wreck this morning, and I was so excited.
Oh, no. What?
I always miss them, and it makes me so mad when I see someone pulled over off the Henry Hudson. But today, I was trying to execute what we call the Jersey jump, which is, everybody's like in the right lane for an exit, and I sneak up, me and everybody from New Jersey in an IROC Z, right? We sneak up on the left and then cut in at the very last minute.
Of course.
Making the people in the right lane having to wait longer. So I'm trying to execute that move, and there's a guy in like a Lexus 250 next to me, and he's left a gap. So I'm going to go in there, right, in between him and the Cherokee in front of me. But he sees that I'm trying to take it, and he puts his foot on the gas. I pull back to the right, like, okay, buddy, I see you're not going to let me in. But he accelerates so hard that he slams into the Grand Cherokee in front of him.
No.
And I was like, yes.
Oh,
awesome.
That's wonderful. Not your fault. Not your fault.
No.
I mean, nope. Did they get out of the car?
The Jeep pulled over to stop and talk, exchange information, and the guy in the Lexus was like either so angry or so embarrassed or both that he just kept driving and took off. But don't worry, I took down his plate number in case anyone needs it.
Do you want to read it out online or read it out?
I'm just waiting for someone to call me to be a witness.
Yeah,
I think that's probably enough for the podcast, right? We can wrap it up. Do you have anything cool coming up?
You know what I'm doing tonight? I'm going to go see Guns N' Roses at Hollywood Bowl. I've literally never seen them. My expectations are not high, and I don't mean that in a shady way. I just mean I know I've never seen them, and I know they're getting to be elderly.
Yeah, dude, Axl's old, and also the singing that he does is hard.
Yeah,
that's not easy on vocal cords,
Yeah. Black Keys are opening for them, though, so that should be fun.
I have seen GNR 3 times.
Okay.
Once a decade for the past 30 years. And I'd say that the first and the third time were the best. I think Axl, on a good night, he'll impress you, but keep your expectations low so that you can beat him.
I will give you a full report.
That does it for the podcast this week. I want listeners to know you can tune into my radio show every weekday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can watch me on Bloomberg TV from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Most weekdays as well. And I'm on Instagram at MattMiller1973.
And you can find me on Bloomberg Pursuits on Bloomberg.com. Sometimes I go on Matt's radio show to talk to him. And you can find me online on Instagram at Hannah Elliott XO.
We'll be back same time, same place next week. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott. And this is Bloomberg.